Good afternoon, this is Charles with the Columbia Basin Herald, and we are here with Moses Lake School District Superintendent Josh Meek. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, certainly.
We got some questions for Josh, and so we will ask them. So, thank you for coming. We really appreciate this.
No problem. Happy to do it. So,
what is the district's stance on arming teachers, whether they want to be armed or not?
sure. So certainly with with the increasing quantity of situations of school violence across our country, the conversation around what are the right safety and security measures, the arming of staff has been an ongoing trend. You see in a partner district in our part of the state, there's even a school district that has implemented that as a procedure. We have not actually talked about it, explored it for a variety of reasons. First of all, we hold on to the belief that there's much more appropriate ways to really create safe learning conditions versus just equipping teachers with a firearm or administrators with a firearm. The other part of that is, as an educational leader, I will tell you that the role of a classroom teacher is a complex role in itself, to meet the instructional needs of students, to differentiate, to hit high learning standards and targets. And so as for lack of better terms, I have to really begin to ask, is creating a situation where now on top of all that we also expect our teachers to serve as armed security? Is that really the focus of what we ask them to do when they enter into a classroom on a daily basis? So not to mention there's all sorts of laws and things around firearms on school property and everything. So at this point, it's not something that's on our immediate horizon. I mean, we get asked the question a lot. Is that something that's right around the corner? And no, at this point, we're really better focusing our time on things that are more realistic approaches in getting there. So.
Well, in regards to that, so more realistic approaches to security. Are we locked front doors, metal detectors being discussed as options to enhance safety and security, particularly at the high school?
Yeah. So, if you follow what's happened, especially recently with some of our board conversations and the focus on increased security, our schools already have locked exterior doors.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that we implemented about 4 or 5 years ago, with the exception of the main entrances to schools, is that during school hours the doors are supposed to be locked. And if you go to some of our elementary schools that have a lot of the exterior doors, you'll notice all of them are locked already. Mm-hmm. That's our district position on that. So the additional things of metal detector, single points of entry, for example, where there's only one way into a school and one way out, or one way in. Because of fire codes, you can't necessarily just have one way out. But
sure.
For one way in, yes, those are all on the conversation plate right now of looking at it, and we're approaching it not only from what we could do, but what are the right steps really to create more secure conditions across our schools. Because the last thing we want to do is have a knee-jerk response to something and just create a new remedy that then complicates something else. Single point of entry, if you allow me the opportunity, is probably the one that you see the most often being implemented.
Mm-hmm.
We've done some touring of some of the schools in Spokane, even large comprehensive high schools that have retrofitted their facilities to have a single point of entry. And so I know one of the questions that we're currently grappling with right now is what would it take to make Moses Lake High School, as an example, have a single point of entry versus the large number of doors that are around the perimeter of the campus. So yes, absolutely, some of those things. In addition, limiting access into the building. Single point of entry isn't the only way to really do that. Mm-hmm. There's other ways to disuse entrances, to better funnel traffic through certain entry points into school settings. But certainly all of those are on the table right now for conversation and really research around. In fact, we're when we talk about research, we also partner with local law enforcement, security experts, all those different groups to really dig into the issue so that we're not just creating a response, but instead to create the safest way. Additionally, and I know many people had an opportunity to read a very well-written reflection from John Lane, who's a longtime community member of ours, but We also are heavily focusing on the preventative and the interventions long before just a response to violence. So around meeting the social and emotional health needs of our students, because there's some clear pathways for a lot of students that the more that we can do to help them to lead healthy lives and to also find productive ways to deal with conflict and to appropriately address them and find advocates that are in a healthy way versus turning to school violence is absolutely something we're also working on right now. So.
Well, tell me a little bit about some of that, about current programs to help students lead better, more healthier lives, but also to address cyberbullying and face-to-face bullying.
Sure. So I'll kind of take the opportunity to answer those a little bit separately, just because they're in some ways different issues, although very similar. We are really, we continue to work with, and we're very hopeful in the next few weeks we will be rolling out a very unique partnership between Grant County Mental Health and Integrated Services and the Moses Lake School District to better support our students. And it would be premature for me to say too much about it yet until that fully comes out, but we really take very seriously our responsibility in helping our students to become well-rounded citizens. And probably one of the most common questions I get about that is, well, isn't that kind of the family's responsibility, or isn't that something that should be happening at home? And I'll tell you, as something that I philosophically believe is, I could invest a lot of energy in worrying about whose job it is to do, but what I will tell you is that whenever situations are created where people aren't necessarily fulfilling that need in a child's life, we as a school district get to deal with the opportunities that are presented in absence of or with that there. So we, I don't spend a lot of time focusing on, should that be getting, because in some homes, yes, there is, if a student is struggling with some mental health issues, that there's a family support system to get it there. And there's a lot of our students that don't have that same family support. And so we are venturing into that whole world, and I'm very hopeful that here, maybe even early as in this month of March, we'll be able to disclose fully what that partnership looks like and how that will better serve our students. In relationship to bullying, unfortunately, especially in our society of a real technology-friendly, quick information, is that the whole, bullying has taken on a whole new look, because, quite frankly, a lot of people can say things without having to say them face-to-face. And still there's people who say awful things and say hurtful things to each other. And in no way, shape, or form do we think it's appropriate. And so we continue to find ways to successfully address those, and in no way, shape, or form do I believe we've fully gotten there yet.
Sure.
That you have to find ways to help students and in some cases parents learn appropriate ways to interact with each other, how to be respectful, how to be civil, how to disagree with somebody without being rude or disrespectful, or in some cases hateful towards each other. And I think that's I'll just say this, and I probably won't make a lot of friends in saying this, but I think that issue stretches far beyond just our school district. I think that's a community-wide issue and concern for us of how do we all recognize what we have in common, that it's okay if, Charles, you and I disagree about something, but that doesn't mean we have to spew hate at each other because we disagree about that topic. And so I'm really encouraged to see how that unfolds in our community, and really across our country and in our world, because unfortunately there's that's been kind of a lost guiding principle for a lot of people, is that if you disagree about something, it must mean that you're a horrible, evil person. And that's just not the case. And so we continue to look for it, and actually we are starting some parent advocacy groups around helping students who are either the victims of bullying or to how to better address it. We have ongoing, this spring we'll be rolling out a series of there's a group called Taproot Theater that comes and gives performances primarily at our elementary schools to help students, through drama, illustrate bullying and what it does and the impacts it has on other students. And there's a huge educational opportunity in all of that. At the same time, we have to keep in perspective that a lot of the students that we're working with are very young. and learning how to help them learn effective ways of communicating and showing that disagreement. So, and we're always open to feedback if people are aware of. I know I recently have met with a particular parent who had some great ideas around programs that she'd seen in other communities, and we're always open to receive those and see what else is out there, because there probably isn't one silver bullet approach to solving the problem. So,
okay. Talk a little bit about the district's communication plan to parents when dealing with threats or emergencies.
Sure. So, again, I know I won't necessarily make a lot of friends. I just ask for some understanding in that whenever we have an issue of school, a threat to school, communication about emergency procedures or whatever, our immediate response from our staff has to be and will always be focused on creating safety at that very moment. And oftentimes that includes things like lockdowns, potentially evacuations, security or shelter in place, where we basically keep teaching as normal, but we kind of secure the building. And oftentimes, whenever those situations happen, there's a huge amount of time that pours into not only putting the school into that situation, but also then securing the next steps of what that means. So whether it's involvement of law enforcement, or whether it's sometimes dispatching of EMT services, or whatever those things happen. And so those all become our immediate steps. And then our secondary responsibility is then the parent communication that follows along. And I've been asked a lot of questions recently about, why don't we know sooner? Why don't we get an opportunity that the minute a school's in a lockdown that we're aware of it? And I'll answer it two ways. One is, I have 3 children that attend our school district, and I will say without a doubt that my having trust and faith that the safest environment is being created for them supersedes my ability to know what's going on. And I know that may seem insensitive, but I want our staff 100% focused on creating safety for our kids and staff, not necessarily worried about all the communication pieces. Now, the feedback is very valuable. That could we do things to prompt it in a quicker time frame? And yes, we continue to find ways, and we'll be adopting this spring a new communication system that makes that release of information sooner. But I also have to tell you is that there's also a manageability around it, that if you create a situation where right away parents are made aware of it, when we do our blanket communication systems, the phone calls, a good example is last week when I sent out a phone call. Those phone calls go to over 10,000 people. And when that phone call starts ringing with 10,000 people, a high percentage of folks don't listen to the message. They hear something and then they hang up the phone, and then they call the school to ask more information. Well, if you imagine then that focus becomes less on dealing with the emergency and more about answering the same question to individuals over and over again. At the same time, many people think that the emotional response kicks in, that the safest thing to do is to get in your car and go to school and pick up your child. But keep in mind, in real emergencies, we want our emergency response teams, law enforcement, to be able to have access to get in and out of the school quickly. And if schools are flooded with parents picking up children, or the phones clogged up because people are calling and continually calling, then it really slows down our effectiveness. And I know that that's hard for people to think about, but we need in most of our schools, the receptionist and the person that's responsible for answering the phone is a critical communication source in a variety of ways. And so, yes, it always becomes our secondary focus, and we really work hard to get it out as soon as we can once the situation is cleared. But at the same time, sometimes that can be a several-hour delay afterwards, because we are, not only attempting to deal with the emergency, but also then resume school operations as normal, and those become our primary focuses. So, and if there's ever questions about that, or why did this happen, the other thing that works against us, I'll tell you honestly, is in our day and age of text messaging and cell phones and lots of kids equipped with them, I often get asked, how is it that I knew from my student before the school called? And frankly speaking, is we're dealing with the emergency. We're not necessarily sitting there where often in a lockdown situation, for example, a classroom full of kids may have access to their cell phone to send their their parents a picture or a message that says, hey, this is what's happening. I just ask for some understanding that we're really doing the very best we can to be responsive, but also take care of that primary need, whatever that is first. So.
You're also asking for a lot of trust, and we live in an age, at least right now, immediately, there's not just our community, but our country and possibly the entire world.
Right.
There's just not an awful lot of trust of institutions right now.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And, not only is there not a lot of trust, but, we also live in a day and age where if I read it on social media, or if I heard it from somebody, then it must be true. And so oftentimes the information being communicated through a series of forwards or strands or text messages isn't even accurate. And so, a good example is we recently had a situation at one of our schools where there was a potential threat, and then that escalated to, rumors and reports of it being much more severe than it actually was. And so then people are responding to inaccurate information. Now, point well taken, and someone say, well, if you clearly communicated from the beginning, then you wouldn't have that challenge. And yes, I do wish too that we could kind of press pause on the entire situation and allow us to better communicate, but it's just not always possible. So.
Getting back a little bit to school design and security, I graduated from high school in the 1980s in Southern California. A big open campus built in the mid to late 1950s. And at one time, I noticed from the elementary schools and the junior high schools and the high schools that I went to, and a lot of the schools that were originally built by the Air Force here, had that openness. And it must be difficult to, reorient a school so that it's not open, that it's closed, especially if it's built sort of as a place inviting the world in.
Yeah.
Or inviting easy coming and going.
Yeah, and you've heard me a lot over these last few months really bring that issue to the forefront. Of there is no doubt that the design of several of our schools, that open, California-style campus where there's open breezeways, walkways, external classroom doors, was definitely a school design model of a certain era. It's also more prevalent in areas that for big chunks of the year have decent weather, and so people can enjoy fresh air as they pass through. But unfortunately, in today's society, it's not the current design of schools. I mean, you'd be hard pressed today to find a school that intentionally is designed in a way that has all that open access for some of the same things that we know. And so if you look at our most recent school designs, Park Orchard, Sage Point, and CB Tech, they all have a much more enclosed feeling. The buildings are quicker to be able to secure. 2 of the 3 of those have single point of entry. As we get further and further apart from original design of schools, it definitely is not only a challenge, but is an opportunity for us moving forward in the future as a community of how do we fix that in our own community? Because 8 of our 10 elementary schools have that California style open campus feeling to them, and honestly, most of our schools were designed in an era long before school violence, long before some of the current reality that we get to deal with. But there's also there's some inefficiencies in a variety of ways, and one of those things that I'll illustrate for you is in our state, for example, when we talk about state construction assistance, of how the state contributes to building schools, is they consider every square foot of the building learning space. So when you talk about the capacity of the schools, it's awesome to add hallways and to do all those things, but that's all considered learning space, which is really, for those of us in the business, it feels very counterproductive, because we know kids typically don't set up a classroom in a hallway or things like that. So in some ways, those schools with the open access give us maximization of using the space in classrooms versus in hallways, where Park Orchard and Sage Point and CB Tech and those others that have hallway structures, that all is calculating into the capacity of the building, which is just a really unfortunate factor. I wish somewhere along the line that would be a part of the formula that's just deducted, is that we recognize that safe passing is part of school design, but it really isn't learning space.
Okay. Well, given the situation with the current construction bond, and we should hear shortly, hopefully, from the appellate court, wouldn't it be simpler to just simply run another bond?
Oh, wow, that's a that's a loaded question. So, for some, the answer to that question would be yes. Maybe it's time for us as a community, as a system, to just kind of press the reset button and start all over. And certainly it would take away some of the pending issues with our 2017 bond. It might take away the feeling that, as a community we voted on one thing and now we may have to do something else as a result of some of these changing conditions. What it doesn't do, however, is getting a 60% supermajority is very challenging work for any school district in the state to really accomplish. And I will remind us that this community has been grappling with this very issue since 2012, and the 2017 bond was the third attempt at that. So while on the surface it may sound like now's just the time to start over, is in some ways I would really ask the question of, okay, so what are we going to do then moving forward, not only for the needs today, but also it's there's a lot of investment of donations of time in resources to run an election, to research what those solutions are, and so and we may face a time and an opportunity where we have no other choice but doing that. But at this point, as a board, we have not discussed that or developed a plan that on this date we're going to decide moving forward. There was conversation right after the 2017 bond was certified. And there was the uncertainty of what was going to happen with the initial litigation of should the district run another bond in April to turn around and just rerun it to secure the construction dollars. And ultimately the board at that time decided that wasn't a good plan, just because communication often is a challenge in itself in helping people understand. I know I get asked a lot already of, well, I don't like how my taxes have gone up as a result of this bond. And it's like, well, we haven't collected any bond money. I know the other day I was reading somewhere where someone believed that we had taken the bond money from the 2017 bond and put it into the general fund and are spending it how we want. And I have to reaffirm that we have not sold one penny of bond sales at this point. And so I also try and put myself in the mindset of re-communicating. We're running another bond now on an issue that many people feel like we've already passed and have done. So, the whole bond issue is certainly a point of a lot of conflict. It also is, I know that the work that we're doing around evaluating the changing state and local conditions have really created some questions for people, and some of them valid questions, and others of them, unfortunately, valid questions don't always produce the answer that one wants to hear. And yes, 60.03% of the voters in this community voted on a particular bond package, but at the same time, I think we have to be realistic in what has shifted and changed since that election time that may prompt some different looks at what that is moving forward for us. At the meantime, as the educational practitioner, is the issue and the challenges aren't going away. We're now a year plus past when the bond was passed, and so when we looked at some short-term solutions to get us through to construction, things like our Camp 5, where we have the fifth graders from Lakeview and Garden Heights on the Chief Moses campus, is we're now we're in the reality where some of those shorter-term solutions are going to have to become longer-term solutions just to get us to whatever place we can finally reach agreement. So.
Okay. Well, I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
Well, thank you very, very much,
Thank
Superintendent Meek. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And talking with us. Thank you.
Thank you.